Good evening and welcome to the Ogden City Council meeting for Tuesday, October 22nd, 2013. Let the roll call reflect that all council members are present, with the exception of Councilmember Wicks and Councilmember Van Hoosier, who are at another event representing the council and will be joining us shortly. Now I'll turn the time over to Vice Chair Garner for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you. It's truly my honor and pleasure to introduce Nathan Williams. Nathan is a scout from Troop 255, and he will be leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance today.
Please arise and join in the Pledge of Allegiance with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Nathan, stay there for a moment and just tell us what merit badge you're working on. And
I'm working on the citizenship in the community merit badge.
hey, you did a good job. We're glad you're here today. Thank you.
Thanks.
Nathan. Okay. Please join us now for a moment of silence. Thank you. First up is a recognition of Robert H. DeBoer, a joint resolution honoring the life and legacy of Robert H. Bob DeBoer, and Vice Chair Garner will read that.
Thank you, Chair Blair, and it's my honor today to read this joint resolution of the Ogden City Council and Mayor honoring the life and legacy of Robert H. DeBoer, or Bob DeBoer as he was better known. Whereas on July 16, 1927, Robert H. Bob DeBoer was born in Ogden, Utah. He was raised in Ogden and contributed to the community throughout his entire life. He earned a Bachelor of Arts degree from Brigham Young University and served a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Holland. On September 13, 1951, Bob married the love of his life, Flora Marie Michelson. They became the parents of 4 children and grandparents of 13 grandchildren and 31 great-grandchildren. He showed love and devotion to family throughout his life. And whereas Bob displayed a commitment to education throughout his work at Weber State University for 37 years, he worked in a number of capacities as purchasing agent, deputy controller, acting vice president for public relations, and assistant to the president. He also performed all of the legislative lobbying for Weber State University for 18 years, and whereas his significant contributions caused him to receive the Distinguished H. Aldous Dixon Award, an honorary doctorate of humanities from Weber State. Even after retiring, Bob remained committed to education and continued to engage in endeavors to expand and heighten educational opportunities. And whereas Bob spent much of his free time involved in local government and politics, he served as an Ogden City Council member, assistant mayor, and president of the Utah League of Cities and Towns. In addition, he contributed to Ogden and National Housing Authority boards, Executive Board of Western Association College and University Business Officers, the Governor's Committee for Justice in the 21st Century, Weber County Tax Review Committee, and Weber County Sheriff's Department Citizens Review Committee. He was also a past president of the Ogden chapter of the Sons of the Utah Pioneers. And whereas Bob was a hardworking man who dedicated much of his life to service, he was a leader in our community and demonstrated many admirable strengths of character, including honesty, integrity, intelligence, and determination. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Ogden City Council and Mayor Michael P. Caldwell hereby recognize and honor the life and legacy of Bob DeBoer. We recognize the unparalleled contributions that he made to Ogden City and are genuinely grateful for the extensive service that he has provided. His presence will be sorely missed in our community, but his profound legacy will continue forward. Passed and adopted this 22nd day of October 2013. And with this, Chair Blair, I make a motion that we adopt this joint resolution.
I'll second.
We have a motion from Vice Chair Garner to adopt this joint resolution and a second from Councilmember Heyer. This is a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes.
And if the representatives from the DeBoer family can come up, I'll present this proclamation to them. Yep, one big picture.
Come stand right here in the front.
Thank you, sir. Here's the box that goes with that, Mr. DeBoer.
He's got one more thing there for you.
Thank you, and it was an honor to read that for the DeBoer family.
Okay. Next, we have a request to be on the agenda. Mr. Bob Neely.
Thank you. My name is Bob Neely, and back in September, I requested of Mr. Bill Cook an opportunity to speak to the council. The purpose of this is to discuss the parking issue around what I refer to as the Marriott Hotel, now the Summit Hotel, and the Creston Plaza and businesses along 25th Street. Back in 1984, my wife and I invested in part ownership of the Creston Plaza. That's 2485 Grant. It's just right over here. And at the time that we purchased our interest in the building, thank you, there was a parking license, an agreement. And the purpose of that was to ensure that businesses along 25th Street would have ample parking. And I can tell you over the years, since 1984, that's become more and more problematic. I have a copy of the, it's called a Parking and Access Agreement. It was executed by Ogden City Neighborhood Development Agency and the Ogden Hotel Associates. The Ogden City Neighborhood Development Agency, as you're aware, was an agency formed to develop businesses along 25th Street. And they got started back in primarily in the early 1980s. Ogden Hotel Associates was a partnership that was formed to build the hotel, which we've known as the Marriott Hotel over the years, and is now owned by apparently Summit Hotel. As mentioned, the purpose of that agreement was to ensure that businesses, there would be a shared parking, if you will, between the hotel and the businesses along 25th Street. And that worked well for, I think, many years. It also addressed maintenance of the parking area. The reason I'm here today is that there was this 30-year agreement, and that 30-year agreement expired in June of this year, June of 2013. And as I understand from talking to Mr. Greg Montgomery, who is the manager for Ogden City Planning, that he's tried to work with the hotel, the present owners of the hotel, to have another agreement executed, but has not been successful to date. So the gist of it is, as we speak today, is no agreement between Ogden City and you own part of that parking area over there, whether you realize it or not. And the hotel. Essentially, you own about 170 parking spaces in that parking area. The hotel owns about 215 parking spaces around the hotel. And there's a Pingree partnership that owns some 50 parking spaces, and that would be on the northeast corner of the lot there. My concern is that come winter, and we're into the end of October here, and then it wouldn't surprise anyone if we had snow and that sort of thing. We're heading into that season. My concern is there's no maintenance agreement now as of June of this year as to who's going to maintain the parking area. As I read the plat, there's an alley called Electric Alley, which runs just immediately north of the Creston Plaza. That is the main entrance off of Grant Avenue into the parking lot. Folks that do business between Grant and Lincoln Avenue to get to restaurants or City Club or Brewski's or any of those restaurants west of the Creston Plaza use what is called Electric Alley. There's a sign that says Electric Alley right there. And as I say, as I read that, that is owned by Ogden City. And I can tell you from being there since 1984 that unless the snow is removed, there's lots of traffic along that alleyway. You can be there during the day, and there's cars just practically every minute of the day that are driving up and down that particular location. So my concern is, as we were heading into winter, who is going to maintain Electric Alley? Who is going to maintain the parking area that you folks own, or the city owns? Mr. Montgomery, I think, has done his due diligence. I think he's tried to work something out with the owners of the hotel and has been unsuccessful, as I understand, to date. Mr. Montgomery can, I'm sure, bring you up to speed as to his efforts to reach an agreement with the hotel. But nevertheless, there is, to my knowledge, there is no agreement, and that concerns me, that we're going to have a large area that is not going to be maintained, especially in the winter. The city enjoys governmental immunity, but you don't enjoy governmental immunity if you're negligent maintaining property and alleys and streets. So from your point of view, I think that would be a concern to you. So my question is, will you look into this and see what can be done about at least maintaining the portion of the parking area that you own, and that is that 170 parking stalls. Now, the other point that I want to bring out is that, as mentioned, parking is becoming more and more difficult during the day. We don't have access, I can tell you, we don't have access to these parking areas that I mentioned. They are just taken. They are not being reserved for people along 25th. It is contrary to the initial maintenance and access agreement and parking agreement. Part of the problem is that when the federal building was built back in the 1960s, they did not foresee or plan for parking for their employees. There's very limited parking under the federal building, but it's extremely limited. The typical employee doesn't have access to that. And what they do, and I can't say that I blame them. If I was in their shoes, I'd probably be doing the same thing, and that is they look for the nearest parking location to where they work for free. And obviously what they do is park across the street on Grand Avenue from the federal building, and they park in the parking area. They get there anywhere from 7 o'clock to 4:30 or 5 o'clock. But they are using that particular parking area that was set aside and designated for 25th Street property owners. And that was emphasized when we had our 16-day government shutdown. There was more than ample parking there. There was vacant areas to park in that location. You go there now, Monday through Friday, you have to circle the block to find a parking area. We have customers and clients that say we can't find a place to park when we come to see you. And I know that the hair salon downstairs has issues with their clients being able to find close parking. You have some elderly clients that go there to have their hair done, and they obviously want to park close, and they can't find a place to park.
Mr. Neely, the time is up now, so
Okay.
thank you, sir.
In any event, I would like you to look into that and see what we can do about solving that.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neely. Next on the agenda is approval of minutes. First, the joint work session of August 16th, 2012, work session of March 26th, 2013, the work session of April 9th, 2013, and the work session of May 14th, 2013. Councilmember Heyer.
Yes, Chair, I've reviewed those minutes and found them to be accurate.
And the work session of May 21st, 2013, the work session of June 13th, 2013, the joint study session of June 25th, 2013, and the work session of June 25th, 2013. Vice Chair Garner.
Yes, Chair Blair, I've reviewed those minutes and found them to be correct to the best of my recollection.
And the regular meeting of July 2nd, 2013, the joint work session of August 15th, 2013, and the work session of September 10th, 2013. Councilmember Stevens.
Yes, I've reviewed those, Mr. Chair, and they're correct, and I propose that we pass the minutes that have been presented.
Second?
We have a motion from Councilmember Stevens and a second from Vice Chair Garner to adopt the minutes. This is a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
That passes. Next up is reports from the Planning Commission. Mr. Montgomery.
I couldn't see him for a minute. I was hiding in the back corner.
Yeah, I was looking.
Mr. Chair, members of the council, you have before you tonight a recommendation from the Planning Commission regarding a petition that had been filed to rezone property. The property is located on the corner of Zoom. It's not Zoom. There we go. Okay. At the corner of 32nd and Lincoln Avenue, this building located here. It was petitioned to rezone the property from an M1 use, M1 zoning to a C2 zoning to allow it to be used as office space. As the petition went to the Planning Commission expanded the request to include not only the parcel that had been petitioned, but include all the M1 properties that existed in this area between 32nd and 31st Street and west of Lincoln Avenue. This was in accordance with the Jefferson Community Plan, which talked about these areas being rezoned to commercial because you had an isolated island of manufacturing where you had commercial zoning to the west, you had residential zoning to the east, and manufacturing in the middle of it did not make sense. Years ago, when the area was industrial, that was the reason it was zoned manufacturing, but those uses have long gone, and the zoning has remained the same. As the Planning Commission reviewed this, they reviewed it, of course, to the Jefferson Plan, which talked about rezoning the properties to C2. They also looked at the community policies, which talk about zoning reflecting the use, that areas in transition, that the zoning should be considered of what is the transition going to, and also that zoning should be the same on cross streets where possible, especially when you look at the idea that you have commercial zoning to the west, not divided by street. Commercial zoning to the east makes sense, and let Lincoln Avenue be the dividing line. As the Planning Commission discussed this, though, one area of discussion they had was this area located right here. Now, this property is also owned by the same people who own the large warehouse building that's to the northwest of this lot. The commission felt, though, that even though it's owned by the same person, there is actually an alley that separates the two properties, and that it'd be still consistent with the plan to have this zone C2 as is the property to the east, and the rest of the property along Lincoln frontage, rather than it being zone C3, which is similar to the property that is in the same ownership as this parcel here. So in the Planning Commission's recommendation to you, they're recommending all that area outlined both in yellow and in red to be zone C2, where the planning staff had recommended the area in red be a C3 zoning because of the ownership. But again, as they looked at the community policies, they felt the C2 was also consistent for all the property rather than splitting as the planning staff had recommended. There was no one at the Planning Commission who voiced concern about the proposed rezoning, and the Planning Commission recommended unanimously to rezone this property to C2.
Mr. Montgomery, hypothetical question. If it was all Zone C2 today, and the owner of the red parcel wanted it to be Zone C3, what would the process be?
Process would be a petition to rezone the property, go through the same public hearing process, looking at the community plan, and determining whether that request is consistent with the community plan in terms of the C3 zoning.
Mr. Montgomery, with Councilmember Gochner's question, if it was changed to C2, would it change anything that they're currently using the property for? With C2, could they still do what they're doing?
The present, well, there is no use
Right.
presently there. The past use was a C3 use, where they were storing the trailers for Wonder Bread. And so C2 use would not allow that type of activity.
Do you want to maybe talk about what the difference is between the C3 and the C2 besides that trailer?
When the Jefferson plan was developed, one of the concerns of the neighborhood was that C2 was more neighborhood commercial type uses. It did not allow major auto repair with outdoor storage. It did not allow car dealerships. It did not allow warehousing per se as a standalone business. And C3 did allow all those type of things. And the feeling was that they did not want to see this become another maybe a used car dealership or that on Lincoln Avenue, which is not the major traffic street, but faced more residential areas. And so to try to get those auto-oriented uses away from the local Lincoln Street, that was one of the reasons I looked at the C2 zoning.
But the other properties owned by the same owner are
Base wall.
warehouses right now.
Oh, yes, here. Well, actually, you've got an auto repair, non-conforming auto repair use happening here.
How about the other two buildings owned by the Red Square?
Let's say CP3, the warehouse is right there.
And the two big
To
ones?
the northwest.
These are large warehouse complexes.
So the owner of all 3 parcels already has 2 warehouses?
Correct.
And that's Wonder Bread who owns that?
Well, no, it was another entity that was leasing space out for them.
But they don't use that anymore.
Correct.
And the trailers are not there?
Correct.
So the 2 big buildings that have, one that has the CP3 on it, and then the one just directly to the south of that is a tire
Big
store,
old tire.
correct?
Uh-huh.
That is C3, right?
Correct.
Would you talk about the difference between CP3 and C3?
There's no difference.
There's no difference. It just remains on the,
We didn't rezone a lot of those properties that have been CP because when we did revisions to the ordinance, the uses were always the same. It just meant CP went to the planning commission, C3 did not. Well, years back, we changed that saying if it's permitted, it's permitted. It doesn't go to the planning commission at all. So the designation CP or C3 are the same thing nowadays.
We don't have any plans for the C3, the person who owns that property, they're in red. He doesn't have any plans at the present time.
We have not been made aware of any.
So currently, it's just a field now that they've moved all the
Thank you.
trailers off.
Uh-huh.
But if he came forward, then he'd have to petition it to be changed to C3.
If you rezone it to C2, uh-huh.
I mean, it sounds like maybe we need to have a little further discussion. I guess I'm a little concerned that one property owner doesn't get to have the same 3 uses on all his parcels. It seems like it would almost make more sense to, leave those all uniform and let them petition later if they want to change it.
So we could take action today and just do that area in yellow to C2,
You could.
and then leave the current in red just as it is today.
The current in red is zone manufacturing right now. And so that would still be that manufacturing island. Our staff's recommendation at the time was to rezone it from M1 to C3, so it'd be consistent with the rest of the person's property.
So the planning staff recommendation is to just make that consistent with the same as the property owner.
Correct.
And
The
the
commission's recommendation
and the
was,
petitioner wanted the C2,
the petitioner is only worried about their corner building.
and then the planning commission wanted the whole area in yellow.
Correct.
Okay.
So, we have to balance what the community plan wants with a property owner that owns 3 parcels that sort of would make sense to keep compatible.
But the property owner was made aware,
We
right?
did send out the notices.
Send out the notices.
Seems to me it would be harder to petition at a later time once it's consistent, the community plan's consistent,
To zone up would be more difficult than to
Correct.
zone down.
right?
and you can do things in a even if it's zoned higher than they could do the same things in a, how do you say this? If it's a C3, they can still do C2 uses.
Correct.
Correct, right.
The downside is that they can, if everything that is C3 can be done, and maybe you wouldn't want that. That's the thing, is there may be some objectionable uses that you just don't know.
Right, and I get the logic on the car lot, but if they want to do a warehouse use, they're limited.
Well, they'd come back in and rezone it. Would they?
That's what we were just saying, that it's a little tougher to zone. Once it's C2, it would be tough to change to a C3. But the reverse would be logically easier to do.
I think just a matter of practicality, however, where this has been already visited by the Planning Commission once, and staff has recommended that it be a C3. I don't think there'd be a lot of obstacles if they did come back with a proposal and they wanted to make it C3. I wouldn't see that there would be huge
It would-
problems to get it done.
Although it would be going
Other than
against the
it's a
community,
process.
it would be going against the community plan, though, at that point. Just curious, how many members of the Planning Commission?
There were six of them.
6-0.
Voted, there's 9,
There are 9 members and only 6 were present that night.
correct?
Well, if the property owner had any concerns, he could have voiced his concern at that particular time, is the only thing, and there was no concerns of citizens at that time.
They can still do the warehousing in the CP3,
Right.
right? That's not going to change.
Correct.
So again, back to my statement, if we just followed the planning staff recommendation and just did the yellow to a C2, and then left and followed the planning staff's recommendation and made that lower area C3 to conform with the property owner, then
That is your decision. You can do that. I think, Glenn, if I remember right, though, the way the ordinance, we didn't do 2 ordinances, did we? We just did the one?
We did not do 2. So if that's something that you wanted to consider, we would want to table this, rewrite the ordinance, and renotice.
would we have to table it, or can we just make that amendment?
I think we'd want to take a look at the ordinance to make sure we could get that correct before you took action on that.
And we would have to send out ordinance, or send out notices again.
We're not required to. We do that to make sure that people know what you're doing and what decision you're considering. The public hearing, the legal required public hearing took place at the Planning Commission. And so the notice that we do is for a public input. So it's not legally required, but of course we like to do that. And if there's a change like this, we like to notice that again to make sure everybody knows what's going on.
You've got ordinance language ready for it to be, for this red area to be either C3 or
C2.
C2.
The ordinance that's before you is all being C2.
I'll be C2. Okay.
I do know the petitioner is really anxious to have a final conclusion on this. You may, and I'll throw this out, and Glenn, you can correct me if I'm wrong, you may look at dealing only with the area in yellow and continue, because they can always make it smaller than what the ordinance has right now in the C2 zoning, and then continue the other discussion for an ordinance that deals only with that other piece.
We could look at the red areas as a proposal at that particular time.
Gary?
I'm not sure why we would really worry too much about it, whereas the petitioner, whereas the property owner of the parcel circled in red has been noticed and hasn't had any issue. I don't know why we would worry for him if he's not going to be worried himself. So it just doesn't make sense to me why we wouldn't just proceed.
Mr. Chair, if I could just add a note with regard to what Councilmember Heyer just mentioned. During the work session, you had requested that we put something on the notice that had the reference to where they could look at or see the uses in that C2 zone, and we did include that in the notice. So they did have that code reference on the notice that went out.
So we had the information, what was considered.
It's the petition.
Okay, I believe the petitioner is here. Leslie Orgill? Is that correct? No? Okay. Well, we will receive public input on this, so we will now receive public input on the 32nd Street and Lincoln Avenue rezone. About the
About this
rezone, yes.
rezone or about something different? you. Okay, seems there's no public input. I'll make a proposal that we do adopt proposed ordinance 2013-45 and follow the Planning Commission's recommendation.
I second it.
We have a motion from Vice Chair Garner to adopt proposed ordinance 2013-45 and a second from Councilmember Stevens. This is a roll call vote.
Councilmember Gochner,
With some hesitation, aye.
Councilmember Heyer,
Aye.
Councilmember Stevens,
Aye.
Vice Chair Garner,
Aye.
Chair Blair.
Aye, that passes. Next up is public comments. This is an opportunity to address the council regarding your concerns or ideas. Please state your name and your address clearly for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
You're welcome to come up now.
I am Jane Vanderstein, and I own Jack and Jill's. And we've been down here for 2 years, and it's nice, and we love it, okay? But my patrons that used to visit us up on Harrison complain there's nowhere to park. There's nowhere to park. And if they park out in front, they're going to get a ticket if they're there more than 2 hours. But they come in and shop, then they go and have lunch or dinner. Well, after dinner, the tickets don't count. But you know what? It's wrong. When the government shut down, we had lots of room. And it's sad. Why don't they park in their own place? What does it cost? $10 a month to park over there where the government office is? They have parking for them. Why don't they use it? Because they're taken away from our clients, and it's wrong. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane.
Hi, my name is Marcy Hooper, and I'm part owner of Studio 25 Hair Salon, 2485 Grant, number 106. And I would also like to discuss the parking problem we have. We've been not been able to get enough hairdressers in our salon because they come down and they personally can't find a place to park, let alone their clients. We've lost a few clients. Well, I wouldn't say a few. We've lost quite a few clients because of the parking situation. And they would love to come down and get their hair done and go to lunch. And they even plan lunch times when after their hair's done, their friends come down. They cannot park. They drive around and drive around. And I stated at one point that it's really sad for downtown Ogden, with all that it has come so far in, that it's easier for people to go to Riverdale than it is down here. And I was once told that Riverdale does not have the ambiance. It will when the businesses can't make it down here and we're back to really pretty brick inside the buildings that you can't get in because they've had to close. We have an issue with the problem, and it's very frustrating for all of us. And we get comments like, until Ogden City posts that we cannot park here, we are going to park here. And they will not accommodate us at all. They won't park any further away than the whole front area, which means one of my clients was told, well, then you're just going to have to park down at Lincoln and walk up all the way at Grant. And I don't think our clients should have to park all the way down at Lincoln. And if we had this situation resolved, because the South Side also has to park over there during the day. Roosters has all the employees park over in this parking lot during the day, which that's what this is designed for, is Ogden City downtown businesses. And so there has to be some type of resolution for us businesses to stay in business down there. We would like to, but our options are getting more and more limited. So I would appreciate your concern on the parking because it is becoming very problematic. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Ann Brennan. I work at 2485 Grant, Suite 200 in Creston Plaza, and I wasn't planning on talking, but my concerns weren't addressed today. Not only do we have trouble parking, working in an attorney's office, we have a lot of elderly clients. I do wills and trusts. We get complaints almost every day that there's no place to park. There's no handicap parking that's adequate. There's one handicap spot there, but it doesn't have the width, so if you have a wheelchair with a ramp, you can't get on and off. We literally go down to the parking lot and go into their car to get them to sign documents, or we meet them at Bagels and Buns because they can't find a parking spot that would makes them accessible into the building. The one parking spot has a curb so that you can't wheelchair there. The other issue that I really struggle with in the past couple years, I've worked here 6 years, in the past 2 years particularly, each year getting worse, nobody is shoveling the parking lot. Nobody is salting it. I personally have looked out the window as I'm making copies and seen people slip and fall. I've run downstairs literally and helped people to the car. I see the people at the salon go to the car and get the car and bring it to the door for their client because they don't want them to walk, they're afraid. I can't tell you how many people I have personally seen slipped and fallen. I wear cleats. I put cleats on my boots every morning when I come into work here because nobody shovels it and nobody salts it. And that to me is very sad, and people have been hurt, and I think more people will be hurt. And I also think that the handicapped citizens of Ogden should be able to have a place to park that they can have access to get to the businesses on 25th Street.
Thank you.
Okay. There's no other public comment. Comments from the administration.
And at this time, thank you.
And comments from other council members.
I saw in the paper, the parking is a real issue, and we want to encourage as much business in Ogden as possible, and that's our goal, especially in the central business district. But also in the paper out at BDO, there was an announcement of a company coming in to our area, a Fortune 100 company that will provide an opportunity for additional job openings of around 700 individuals. And so that'll add to our economy, and that's a nice opportunity for Ogden. But also, if we can come up with a solution, not only working with 25th Street Association, but other businesses around 25th Street, and also addressing it with the federal employees, because I think they have a responsibility here that needs to be addressed also, and maybe we can come up with a solution that will be compatible to those in that area. So.
And Mr. Neely, asked if we were aware of this. We are, and we know that Mr. Montgomery is working very hard to bring up some resolution to this. And again, we'll be working with all parties to see what we can do to address some of these concerns and see what we can do to come maybe to a compromise on many of these. And also, off of this subject, but I want to thank Chair Blair for speaking at President White's inauguration today as the new president of Weber State University, and it was a fun event. And Chair Blair, we appreciate you, supporting the City Council and representing us so well.
Thank you. It was neat to be involved in that. If there's no other comments, next is consideration of adjourning into a closed executive session. Mr. Williams.
Mr. Chair, a closed executive session is permissible for the purposes set forth in the agenda.
I'll make a motion then that we adjourn into a closed executive session.
I'll second.
A motion from Vice Chair Garner to adjourn into a closed executive session, and a second from Councilmember Heyer. This is a roll call vote.
Councilmember Heyer?
Aye.
Councilmember Stevens?
Aye.
Councilmember Gochner?
Aye.
Vice Chair Garner?
Aye.
Chair Blair?
And then
And we'll just adjourn the
from in there.
meeting from in there. Thank you.